Hello, my name is Sochi Elmore, and we are doing another episode of the Unforsaken Sisters podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have a special guest, Tamara Demeree, and she is our marketing director for Unforsaken Ministries. We are so excited to hear your story, and we are so blessed to have you part of this team.
Oh, thank you, Sochi. You're so sweet.
Yes, we're going to go right into this podcast, and I just want you to tell us a little bit, an overview about yourself.
Oh my goodness. So where to start, right? So I have just recently moved to Lake County, Florida, having lived in upstate New York for, let's just say 50 plus years.
Oh, wow.
And so this is kind of a new chapter for me and my husband. So I'm excited to be here and be exploring what that next path is that God has designed for me. So I come from a large family. There are 7 of us,
Wow.
and we really are a true blended family.
Yeah.
My parents, Skip and Diane, we started up all of us together in upstate New York, where most of us graduated from high school. And so now there's 7, and we lost track how many grandchildren and great-grandchildren my parents have,
Wow.
but a big and really close family that I come from, which I think is important to note because some of the things we're going to talk about today are about family and about blended families and some of the unique types of families that there are out there these days. So grew up in upstate New York, attended college there, went to Syracuse University, and received my degrees there. Was married at a young age, right, out of college, and had 3 children from my first marriage. So that's a little bit about me. We're going to get into some other details of my story as we go along.
Yes. So you said you were the oldest of 7.
Yes.
So the oldest of 7, different personalities, and you mentioned also your parents Skip and Diane. Your parents are very family oriented.
Yes.
So if he could, he would want you guys all in the same plot.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. My dad is a big family man. Even though my dad was the only child, my mom is one of 7 children also.
Oh, wow.
So she comes from a very large family. And I think because my father didn't have those siblings, that he wanted a big family and was really excited about having as many of his family around him as possible.
That's
so yeah,
awesome.
If my dad had his way, we would all live within a 5-mile radius on the same plot of land and have one big party going on all of the time.
So with that, I want to go to our next question of tell us what you're doing right now and how you started even working and getting connected to Unforsaken.
Yes, great. So that is a fun story, being that, Unforsaken kind of started as a family ministry with Mo and Tom Midlow. And Mo is my sister and Tom, my brother-in-law. Yeah. So I probably was connected to Unforsaken quite a while ago. And even though I started and obviously was raising my family in upstate New York, being part of Unforsaken was something that made a lot of sense for me. At one point in my past, I became a single mom after a challenging divorce.
Right.
And at that time, Mo and Tom were starting kind of the early stages of our ministry, which was once called the Vineyard. And I actually served on the board of directors of the Vineyard for some time from a remote standpoint. Back before it was even cool to be virtual and remote, we were doing that through the Vineyard. So I served on the board for a little while and hopefully brought a little perspective to some of the challenges that single moms were facing and helped to kind of do some of the early groundwork for the ministry to get started.
The foundation.
Yes.
So I want to go back to your official title is Marketing and Sales Director for Unforsaken. What did you do before you became that?
Oh, yes. So that's a long story, and we don't have enough time to talk about all of that today. But I did work in the corporate world for about 15 years right out of college, and kind of went up through the professional ranks with that company, and then had a change in my career where I went to work in the nonprofit sector, and I worked in the sport and recreation industry.
That's so cool.
I helped a brand new organization kind of get established, and we created a new sports facility in upstate New York in Cortland County, where it was an indoor recreation center. So everything from hockey and figure skating to soccer and lacrosse, we did there. And I did that for about 12, 13 years until I made another career change. And then I got into teaching and started to get involved with higher education in the college environment. I worked for, we call it SUNY Cortland for short, in upstate New York, one of our state school systems, where I taught sport management, having worked in the sport industry for 12, 13 years. I had a little bit of knowledge of how to do that and how to manage it from the behind the scenes aspects. So I began teaching students how to do that. And then this very similar time frame, was given an opportunity to teach as an adjunct at Syracuse University. So that was like a dream come true for me, because I was able to give back to the university that helped train me and teach me. So I became a professor at Syracuse University for right up until last fall, which was one of the heartbreaking things that I did have to give up to leave New York, was to leave Syracuse and my teaching there. So I taught, and then I taught for a couple of years at Cazenovia College, which is a private institution in Cazenovia, New York, and also again got back into teaching sport management. So I did that full time. So I served a lot of roles at Cazenovia, also taught some business classes there, and really got to shape my professional teaching, if you will, style and how we would do that. And of course, we went through the pandemic during that time. So we were doing a lot of online and virtual type exercises and computer teaching and training. So I really got a lot of experience at doing those type of things. So long story short, being a professor and a teacher, I think kind of also helped prepare me for what we're doing now and Unforsaken Ministries, and being able to learn how we can renew the minds of women and children. They are women and help children at the same time, to be able to get into the Word of God. So I'm very fortunate that Mo and Tom gave me a shot last summer to do some virtual work for the ministry. And then when we moved to Florida, that just kind of was a natural transition. Before I officially was with the ministry, I would often have these strategy discussions with Tom Medlow, particularly about the future and what that meant for the ministry, and just really talking about where we thought the ministry would go. And some of those things are happening now, and it's really exciting to be part of it and see kind of some of those things come to fruition. So it's exciting.
Oh, that is so cool. So the things that you started 10, 11 years ago are coming into fruition, and you are actually helping implement it, not from afar, but right here on the ground. So again, we are so blessed to have you with this ministry. Thanks, and you add so much value. I'm so happy. You are a part of a beautiful blended family, and I'm looking forward to hearing this, because there's so many people that are part of a blended family in our society, in our churches, and it's something that's not easy. But it can be a very beautiful thing. And so I really want you to share this and share. It can't be a sensitive subject, but it's your story, and I know that it can help so many people out there.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've become more aware of, over the past probably 20 years. But I think it kind of goes back to my own family, my own siblings, that we are a blended family.
Right.
During this time when my parents finally moved to Lake County, one of my sister's best friends was kind of pulled into the family and adopted. And so we became a blended family even before we realized that that was happening.
Wow.
And so that, you know, with
That's
my parents
awesome.
making this transition to move to Florida permanently, I was at that time raising my
Wow.
family, starting my career, starting to figure out what it was like to be a working mother and try to balance all of that with family and a career. So I guess kind of give a little bit of background of how that all kind of established in my family. And then let's fast forward about 15 years and into a time where it was a big challenge for me. Going through a divorce was not something as a Christian woman that I had planned, certainly.
Right.
And something that was unfortunate that it happened, and something that, you know, I still somewhat struggle with a bit as a Christian and trying to kind of, you know, work through some of those things. But so during that time of going through a divorce, trying to pick up the pieces from that hurt, and also trying to shield my children as much as possible from that. Because, you know, we know that there are a lot of families out there that do face challenges with divorce, but certainly the parents don't want to see those negative impacts happening to their children. And so my goal through the whole process was, how do I minimize the impact on my 3 children? And how do I help to build them up to have a positive, productive future? Because that was my whole focus at that time. So a lot of things that people go through during that challenge of being a single parent, and then considering maybe in the future, you know, kind of creating a blended family. A lot of us face that, and we don't always know that's what the plan is for us, but we have to really find a way to kind of make the most of it. So with that taking place in my life, I really didn't think that I would remarry. I had just kind of made the decision that I didn't want to be controlled by a man again, which was my experience that I went through. I didn't want my children to go through that hurt again by remarrying and having, you know, potentially something happen again to them. So my focus really at that time was all about my kids and trying to give them a healthy place, a place where they could, you know, heal and move on. So during that time, we started to do that transition where your children kind of go and spend time with the other parent, which is a excruciating thing to go through as a mom, particularly when you're used to being with them and spending this time with them, and then you have to hand them off to the other parent, right? So that's a big challenge, I believe, of blended families and for people going through those, is what's the best thing for the children to go through, and how do you kind of give them the environment that's going to be best for them. So that was hard to do that, obviously, but it was also left me with times where it was lonely. I did have a house at that time. I was very fortunate. I had some angels in my path that helped me to finance and get my house that was built in the 1800s originally. It's part of the Underground Railroad, which is kind of some cool history that came along with my home. And I was doing a lot of fixing up. So a lot of repairs and cosmetic work that had to be done to kind of make it my own. One of the things that I found during this process was I didn't know what my decorating style was. So most women probably say, oh, I love, you know, farmhouse chic, or I love, you know, to have this particular style. I had no clue because I wasn't allowed to decide how to decorate. It was pretty much decided by my first husband. So I explored design styles, figured out what I liked, and I discovered I was a French provincial shabby chic girl. So a little farmhouse style maybe thrown in there for good measure. So doing a lot of those repairs myself was a therapeutic thing for me. And being a contractor's daughter growing up, I also had my father to help me and some other people along the way that were great. So during that time, though, it got lonely, right? So you can imagine your children are off with their other parents and you've got a weekend that some of that time you can spend doing house repairs, but you can't do that all the time. So I started to get a little frustrated, right? And one day a coworker said to me, well, why don't you try one of those dating sites? Sure. Okay. Yeah. That easier said than done. So I did experiment with a couple of the dating sites at that time and just kind of, see what was out there. Some really funny stories came out of that. I actually had this one gentleman I was talking to for a couple of weeks on email. We were about to get together and have coffee. And a couple of days before that, he sends me this video. He was interviewed in a TV interview for his job. And I thought, oh, cool. I'll get to kind of see, what he's up to in his work. And so I watched this video and I'm kind of watching the video and thinking, this is not the person that I've been seeing pictures of on this dating site. And I'm puzzled and confused and thinking, is this really the person? So they put his name across the bottom of the screen on the TV interview. And come to find out, the pictures that he put on the site were of him like 20 years ago. So much different person. We all go through those challenges, right, with age. But needless to say, we did not get together for coffee. So, those things happen in those dating sites. So I was very frustrated with that whole process. One day, one of my girlfriends came into work and we worked together and she said to me something very profound. And she was, listening to what the frustrations I was going through. And she says, Tammy, maybe the person that God has in store for you is just not available yet. And that stopped me in my tracks and thinking, yes, it's not my timing, it's God's timing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we get in those situations sometimes where we're so impatient about what's going on. And finally, I listened and I started to think, well, maybe this is the case. Maybe the person I'm meant to be with just isn't available. Sure enough, the gentleman that God was about to put in my path about 18 months later was also going through a divorce. So he was not available for me at that time. So I was very fortunate that I did learn some patience during this time and spent more time in the Word and studying and not as much in the dating side. And then one day I was fortunate to be able to meet my current husband, Carl.
So how did you meet? I want to hear how you met Mr. Carl.
Yeah,
let's hear
Carl and I met. Kind of a fun story on that too. Carl and I were actually just casual friends on Facebook. We had just recently become friends on Facebook too. He tells the story that he asked about me at a sporting event that he saw me at one of my son's lacrosse games. He asked a mutual friend about me, and that mutual friend said, oh, well, she's dating somebody. So, don't even bother kind of thing. So Carl just sent me a friend request and we were just kind of casual friends. Well, our mutual friend didn't realize that I wasn't dating that person any longer. So anyways, about middle of July, I'm still trying to gather up the decorating of my house, right? I'm still trying to decorate, buy things, redo, and I'm searching for summer outdoor furniture. I'm a big fan of white wicker. And so I was looking for some white wicker, and I happened to be looking at Facebook one day and I saw, my friend Carl, who I was friends with on Facebook, I'd never really spoke to before. He was having a moving sale and he had some white wicker on there. So I inquired about the furniture that he had. And he says, well, I've got some friends coming over on Thursday night for a preview night. Why don't you come on over and take a look? So I got up the courage to go and just, be able to go and check out the furniture that he had at this moving sale. And little do we know, that was the way that God wanted us to meet. So we were on the back porch. He was mingling amongst other friends, trying to sell the furniture in his house after his separation and divorce. And I ended up buying these 2 rockers, wicker chairs from him. And then the funny story is we took them out to my car and they wouldn't fit in my car. So I had to ask him, well, I said, my son could borrow a truck from one of his friends and we could come pick it up. And he's like, no, he says, how about I just drop him off at your house Sunday after church?
Right.
So I said, sure, that would be great. So he dropped him off, and then that's where we just started talking and having a conversation. And little did we know we had so much in common, very kind of some similar circumstances. Our paths had crossed in the past that we didn't really realize. We were both Dallas Cowboy fans in upstate New York, which doesn't happen very often. And there were just so many things about Carl that I just knew that this was the man that God had chosen for me. Wow. Still, when we were first dating, I didn't expect to get married. I told Carl I really wasn't intending to be married again. But again, God had different plans for us, and things happened pretty quickly, and we ended up getting engaged and married.
Well, hold on. Do you still have the wicker furniture?
We do.
Oh, okay.
We do. When we moved to Florida, he said that he was concerned that they weren't going to fit in the moving truck. And I said, the wicker chairs have to go to Florida.
That's what connected us.
We do have them.
So you guys have a blended family. I'm assuming he's got some kiddos. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So when we met, Carl's children were all college or older. So he had 3 children. I have 3 children. Mine are a little bit younger. When we met, my daughter, I think, was around 10 years old. My youngest, my son finishing up high school, junior, senior in high school, and my oldest was college age. So Carl has 1 boy, 2 girls, and I have 2 boys, 1 girl. So we had a real Brady bunch in our family coming together, a real blended family. So it was pretty cool. We're very fortunate that when we married, we didn't have young children at the time. I do think that made the transition of having a blended family much easier for us. And that our children were a little bit older. I had 2 children at home at that time. So even though, there were certainly still some challenges of Maddie and Brad having to go spend time with their dad. We didn't have that as much as probably a lot of other families do today when you have young children. So we're fortunate in that. And just that whole process of accepting a new person into your family and new people with these other strangers that some of my children knew some of the other children. There were some kind of like arm's length relationships there of knowing them from school or from other community activities. But I think just like any that people go through some of these different challenges that they have. So
man, that there's so much, and we have to have like segments because there's how did they, how long before you introduce them to your kids and how did they react? But in a nutshell, like what's some advice that you can give for blended families?
Yeah, we were fortunate. I was very fortunate that Carl was a Christian. That was one of my stipulations through that dating process.
That's so good.
Number one was that.
That's so important. Christian. Yes.
And through that, that really created a platform for me as a woman that was critically important. Good. Carl was part of the church that we went to. He was a deacon. He was the treasurer of their board at one point. So I knew Carl his heart was in the right place. Carl also had been involved with VBS at our church and that. So he was good with kids. He was always trying to be the funny guy. And story I heard in church once was he danced down the aisle at VBS. So I'm like, this has got to be, a good guy. Yeah. So some of the advice that I think that, and Carl and I kind of talked about that over time is what would we say to other blended families? So some advice. First of all, pray. Good. Pray is one of the most important things that you obviously can do. Pray. Through that process, your kids are going through a lot of challenges because they're being shipped back and forth, the younger ones back and forth between households. They're exposed to all kinds of messages that you can't control. And so things are out of your control and that the only thing you can do is pray. So
that's so good.
Pray alone, pray together, all of those opportunities that you have, just take advantage of it. Carl and I started attending some Bible studies together.
Yep.
So that's really important, I think, as well, to try to establish what are the new rules of this house going to be? How do we feel about certain, subject? How are we going to deal with these things that come up? But being such a big family with 6 kids, we had to get smart pretty quickly and have a strategy.
Yes.
One thing that was very important to us was that we invited everybody to everything we did. So if it was one person's birthday party at the house, or going out to dinner, they all would be invited, and we would encourage them all to attend as much as possible. So we were fortunate that they were all at that time kind of in the area, other than one of our daughters. So we would try to include them as much as possible.
That's so good.
You can't force the children to kind of get along with each other, but we're very lucky that some of them have become very close. Like Carl's son and my middle son Brad Carl's son just officiated their wedding.
Oh wow!
So those things will happen naturally, I believe, if you provide them with a healthy platform for doing that. So we include them in everything we do. Everyone's included. Another thing that Carl and I had to get really smart about was money, right? And so how do we deal with some of the money issues? We have some children that are still in school. Some are going to college. Some that are graduated, obviously starting to start their own families. So
good.
Example, Christmas. How do we handle 6 kids in Christmas in a blended family? My husband Carl is a finance guy. So he was a CFO and controller when I met him, and is today. And so he's a big spreadsheet guy. So I love spreadsheets too, and I even love them more now that I've met Carl. But Carl said, we're going to create this spreadsheet, and we're going to have a budget. This is what we're going to spend on each of the kids for Christmas, and they each get the same amount. We would figure out kind of wish lists that they would have and come together and keep track of everything we bought. So we made it even by the end of the day, which is really important to Carl in particular. And we did the best we could. And we still continue to do that today.
Wow.
Things like marriages, because they're about to get married. Some of them were kind of at that point where they're being engaged, and how do we handle the finances of weddings? So again, we made a decision as a couple that all 6 children were going to get the same amount from us. That we would just designate the same, whether boy or girl. A lot of people give and help out with their daughters more because that's kind of the tradition. But we said, we've got 6, so we've got to figure out how to do this. So we each of them get the same amount for the wedding, and we are fortunate to have a timeshare. So we say you get a week on the timeshare you can use for your honeymoon. So that was something, some of the simple things that we really worked towards and continue to. And sometimes it's hard, it's challenging when they're all different ages. Some are having children, some are still in school, and so you're trying to help them kind of navigate through life's challenges and help them where they need help and where you can help them. We have 4 granddaughters.
Oh, wow.
So Carl's 2 daughters one has 3 daughters and the other has 1. And so we're very fortunate to have 4 granddaughters already. And I have grandchildren from my first marriage from my stepdaughter, Emily, and they're twins, 12 years old.
Wow.
So the amazing thing to me about my husband is his generosity and love, and immediately still accepted my stepdaughter and her children, and we still, try to participate in their lives as much as we can. So I'm very fortunate. I have a godly husband that is dedicated to help with that blended family.
That is so good. Just so much practical advice. And I mean, like when you said prayer, I think that sometimes that's the last resort, and that's really should be the first resort. And then also the budget. I mean, that is so just being equal with all the kiddos, because they are okay. I think that costs that. They know, and so for you guys, that took extra work on your part, but it's so needed. Even to this day, you still do that, I'm sure.
Yes, we do. One of the things I love about our big family is the stockings at Christmas, and seeing all the names on the stockings, and the new ones that get added, the spouses and the grandbabies coming in that we can just see those stockings growing each
so
year.
Cool.
So that's fun.
When you were talking and you were saying about, Carl, I do just firmly believe, even though I don't know this, but I believe the Holy Spirit is just reminding me that God was placing Carl in your heart and in your life by the prayers of your mama, of your sisters, of your brother, because they knew you were hurting, and you were like solo in New York. Yeah. But I mean, like, we should never take for granted what we can do with our families. So I just really do believe God was setting in motion that special someone for you, which was Carl. Sure. I think about, too, advice with communication. Tell us about that.
Yes, communication is a big challenge, I think, and communication covers a lot of areas, including things of like what you do talk about around the children and what you don't. And
that's good.
Carl and I really, from the start, and this started before I even met Carl, was we had a philosophy that anything that is about the other parent, we don't talk about in front of the children.
Right.
It's good. Hard. It's hard because things happen and they affect your life. Yes. People are late or they don't follow through on something, or something really kind of crazy happens, and you have to figure out how to deal with it. And it's hard not to talk bad about the other parent.
Yes.
But I really felt that if my children were going to come out of this divorce and transition in a positive way, that I was not going to be the one that was bashing their father. So, you can have discussions in private that deal with those things and come up with challenges, but not having them with the children around. I think that's the number one most important thing, important advice that I have for anyone who's going through that type of challenge is be private about those things and try to keep, kids are smart. It doesn't matter what age they are, little ones all the way up. They will figure it out. They know what's going on, and you don't have to be the one that tells them that, their mother or their father have done something. They will know when they need to know that. And you just have to have trust. And as I said, it's just so hard sometimes. And we all slip up. We all slip up. I have not been perfect. But I try really intensely just to make sure that, okay, we can't talk about that right now. We change the subject. We do whatever we have to do.
That's so good. Because it's very easy in the moment to let out your frustrations. What's a good Bible verse that really got you going and motivated you in tough times, or a Bible story?
Yeah, actually, our Bible verse for Carl and I is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for you, plans to do good and not to harm you. When you're going through a divorce, that is an important comfort you need, that you know that, yes, this is challenging and I'm going to face some really tough times, whether it's going to court or dealing with lawyers or whatever that might be, or just conflicts that arise. But you feel like, is this really all, worth it? And that verse Carl brought to our relationship and just felt like this is our verse, and this was created to give us hope that we can get through these challenging times. And there's positive things that come out of it at the other end.
I love it. How long have you guys been married?
So Carl and I met actually this summer 10 years ago, and we were married within a year of meeting. So next spring in April will be our 10th anniversary.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So as I think about like your family verse, who are some great mentors in your life that really helped you along this journey?
Well, God definitely put people in my path I needed when I needed them. I mean, you just don't know that support system, what you're going to need. People like my best friend, Tina, who gave me a place of refuge to come and live when I needed to during that the divorce time, and people who helped to loan me money, whether it be sisters or parents, to be able to establish my household at the beginning. that I could then later pay back. So there's a lot of different people that come along the way. Coworkers. I had some lovely, I told you about Rhonda, some lovely people who were just kind of a peaceful voice in the midst of the chaos. Right. Carl and I also, I mentioned we went to some Bible studies. We were involved in our church up in New York. We went to a study that I thought was really helpful. It was about blended families.
Oh, wow.
And it was called Blended and Blessed, I believe. And there's a book by a gentleman named Ron, I can't think of his name, that him and his wife wrote about blended families. And there's so many different types of blended families out there. People don't realize they're not just families from divorce. But if you're adopted, you're in a blended family. So there's so many different challenges people face. I think the latest statistic I saw was something like 40% of families have some kind of blended element to it. So it's affecting a lot of people. And there's a lot of positive things that can come out of blended families. The relationships that can be built as a result. And so I think that seeking some of those opportunities, whether it's a thing at your church that they might be doing or a study you can do on your own, especially together, help you kind of establish how this new normal is going to be for you and your family. So there are a lot of good resources out there. We had a family, the Thomas family in our community up there. They were missionaries originally, went off to work in other countries, and then came back to our area, and they were adopting children along the way. So they were a great example to us of how do we raise up a family when children are coming from different directions and different families from their past.
Wow, that's so good. She's got so much to tell, and she actually is doing a lot. She has already done a live teaching. So we are going to put that live teaching link in the comments, because I want you to go back and hear her full testimony, because some of the people that she's mentioning, that just for reference, she's got such a great and full story that I want you to get the whole complete story. So as we wrap the podcast up, I just want to ask you some fun questions. What's something that's your favorite thing to do?
One of my favorite things is really just anything that involves the sunshine. So all of those years of coming down to Florida and visiting and then going back up to the cold, I think got this underlying desire for sun for us in upstate New York. So anything that involves the sun, whether it be sunbathing, playing outside, gardening, house repairs. My husband will tell you that I'm like a chameleon. I need to be in the sun and get the vitamin D just to have the energy. I can't go without it.
It's a real thing.
Real thing. So those are some things I like to do. And just anything that's it evolves throughout the years, of course, with our change in the seasons and what we do. So awesome. Fun.
So what's something about you that many people may not know?
Well, it may come to a surprise to some people, but I'm a big Star Wars, Star Trek fan. A lot of people will always say to me, "Oh, you're so, that doesn't seem to fit the mold of who you are." But when I was a young woman in college, I kind of got hooked on Star Trek.
Oh, okay.
And so the Trekkie in me, during that time, I think it was Next Generation, the TV series was on. And I loved it so much. I looked forward to watching it. And so anything along the two different platforms of Star Trek or Star Wars is cool in my family. And of course, I was fortunate to then have two boys. So that was all part of that too. But a funny story that some people don't know is my first son, John. You debate with your spouse about how this name is going to come about. And he wanted to name John after his father, and his father's name was John Leo. Well, I agreed to it in the negotiation because at that time, Captain Jean-Luc Picard also had the name John Luke.
Okay.
So not the middle name. Funny. So I said, well, how about we name him John Luke? And then it was a good compromise to keep the initials the same. But little did people know that this was one of my fascinations was with Jean-Luc Picard.
Cool. That's so cool. As I think about hearing your story and listening to the live teaching that you did, it's truly a full circle with Unforsaken. And you get to pour into single moms and help single moms. And even with this podcast and your testimony that they are not alone, that they can get through this. And whether or not they will find a mate, that's up to the Lord. But this is something that has been in the works for forever, before you were even created. And God just opened this door for you to serve in this ministry. It's such a beautiful thing, because 10 years ago, or whenever you did with Vineyard, it was laying the foundation, and you weren't thinking 10 years you were going to be working for Unforsaken. And now, and I just think it's such a beautiful thing that God works everything out, and we just beyond our imagination, that we don't even pray for things, but he answers, because it's the desire of our heart. And I'm so thankful that you shared your story, and also with the live teaching. And we are so blessed. Again, I know I've said this, that you are on this team. I know that Mo loves having her big sister on this. It's emotional for me too, because I just know, like, I can see that God's hand has been on you, and it's been a difficult road. Yes. But everything that you've been through, God is making it good, and he is going to use all those different circumstances for his glory.
Yes.
It's it's a beautiful
God
thing.
God is so good.
He is.
And we may be in the midst of a challenge or a season that is really challenging for us personally or for our family.
Yes.
But he's there. He's there for us, and he can help us get through anything if we just allow him to, right? So he's so good.
He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. Because you are unforsaken, right? You are unforsaken. We are unforsaken. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Unforsaken Sisters podcast. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel on Unforsaken, and we will see you next time on the Unforsaken Sisters podcast. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us on our Unforsaken Women YouTube channel. For any future videos, please like and subscribe below.